The story of Charlie Kirk's assassination has only grown more disturbing as new details about the shooter, Tyler Robinson, come to light. He was just 22 years old, a seemingly ordinary guy from Utah who didn't stand out much to anyone who knew him. But the FBI's findings tell a completely different story. This wasn't random. Robinson had a plan, a rifle hidden in the woods, escape routes mapped out, and forensic traces left behind on a campus rooftop where he fired the fatal shot. Investigators have also uncovered online messages that hint at political anger and possible radicalization. His own family, registered Republicans and deeply religious, ended up helping authorities track him down after he admitted what he had done. Now, with each discovery, the picture becomes clearer. This was a calculated act, and the truth behind Robinson has shaken everything we thought we knew, what we know about the shooter. What investigators have pieced together about the shooter so far is both unsettling and incredibly detailed. Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old from Utah, did not initially stand out as the type of person who would carry out such an attack. On the surface, he looked like an ordinary young man, quiet, unassuming, and by most accounts, not particularly interested in politics. His neighbors described him as someone you wouldn't give a second glance to if you passed him on the street. He blended into the backdrop of small-town life, making the revelation of his role in the shooting even more jarring. Robinson's background paints a far more complex picture than the public expected. He comes from a family with deep ties to conservative America. His parents are registered Republicans, his father a Christian minister with a history in law enforcement, and other relatives have served in the military. This is a family that, on paper, fits neatly into the image of patriotic, church-going middle America, hardly the profile of radicals or fringe ideologues. Unlike the stereotype often pushed in political discourse, neither Robinson nor his family resembled the caricature of trans liberals or the radicalized left. Quite the opposite. Theirs was a household where Republican values and conservative faith traditions shaped everyday life. Weapons were not foreign to Robinson. In fact, he had been introduced to them early on, part of a culture where hunting rifles and firearms were as ordinary as backyard barbecues.
Experienced in both ministry and law enforcement, believed in teaching respect for weapons. At a young age, Robinson grew up familiar with rifles. With gun safety lessons delivered at the same time as Sunday sermons, it was less about rebellion and more about heritage, a generational passing down of traditions that combine faith, family, and firearms. Yet, somewhere in this environment, something shifted. Investigators now believe Robinson had become more political in recent years, though his motives remain murky. The details surrounding the shooting show calculation. A carefully chosen vantage point on a campus rooftop, a bolt-action rifle hidden in nearby woods, escape routes pre-planned through forested terrain. Forensic investigators uncovered palm prints, forearm marks, and boot impressions on the rooftop, all pointing back to him. The precision of the shot, from 142 to 200 yards depending on the report, was not the work of a novice, but of someone who had both patience and training. Even the rifle itself adds to the unease. Described as a high-powered Mauser-style .30-06 hunting rifle, it represents the kind of firearm passed down through families like his. What makes it disturbing is not the weapon alone, but the possibility that Robinson's long-standing familiarity with it helped enable a political assassination attempt. Reports of engravings on bullet casings referencing identity and ideology, though not fully verified, have only deepened the mystery over whether Robinson was driven by emerging political obsessions or a personal break with reality. What unsettles investigators the most is the contrast between Robinson's family background and the act he committed. This wasn't the story of an isolated drifter, nor of someone raised in chaos. This was the son of a minister from a family rooted in conservative traditions with military and law enforcement ties. They were the type of household where loyalty to country and faith was expected, where Republican ballots were the norm, and where children learned about firearms under the watch of trusted elders. By all accounts, Robinson was not the kind of man anyone would have singled out as a future assassin. And yet it was he who climbed that rooftop, leveled his rifle, and pulled the trigger at Charlie Kirk. Surveillance footage shows that he arrived on campus well before the shooting. He didn't rush. He didn't look lost.
He moved with the kind of purpose that only makes sense in hindsight, the kind where you look back at the video and realize he knew exactly where he was going the entire time. He entered one of the main buildings near the event space, took the stairwell all the way to the roof, and positioned himself high above the crowd gathering below. From that vantage point, he had a direct, unobstructed view of the stage where Charlie Kirk would be speaking. What stands out most about the video isn't just how he got there, but what happened afterward. As soon as the shot was fired, the same cameras caught him making his escape. He didn't hesitate. He didn't panic. The moment that shot rang out, it was as if he already knew exactly what came next. You can see it in the footage. No wasted movement, no looking around, no scrambling like someone caught off guard. He swung himself off the edge of the roof with practiced ease, dropped down and hit the ground running across the open areas. He moved fast, but controlled, never stopping, never breaking stride. It wasn't the chaotic sprint of someone afraid of being chased. It was deliberate, like he had rehearsed it in his head 100 times. He cut across campus in a line that made sense only if you knew where you were going, through gaps between buildings, toward the tree line, and then straight into the cover of the woods and nearby neighborhoods. By the time law enforcement secured the scene, he was already gone. The way he moved suggests he knew the layout well, where the blind spots were, where cameras might not be looking, and how to use the chaos behind him as a distraction. It didn't look improvised. It looked like someone following a plan, one step at a time, with the confidence of knowing exactly how much time he had before the net closed in. Not long after, investigators discovered the weapon they believe he used, a high-powered, bolt-action Mauser 30-06 rifle. It was found discarded in a wooded area near the university, wrapped in a towel, almost as if he had staged the drop in advance. Inside the rifle's chamber was a single spent cartridge. Alongside it, several unspent cartridges were recovered as well. This wasn't some hurried decision made in panic. The way the weapon was abandoned suggests he intended to leave it behind all along, distancing himself from the evidence as fast as possible. Forensic teams have been all over the rooftop, the stairwells, the escape route, collecting every possible piece of evidence. They've pulled palm prints from railings, lifted footprints from the ground, including the distinctive pattern believed to match those Converse sneakers, and even found forearm impressions that suggest where he steadied himself to fire the shot. Each clue helps build a clear picture of what happened,
mapping his movements before and after the shooting with increasing precision. Law enforcement says they now have hours of video footage, multiple angles showing his approach, the shot, and his escape. They have digital forensics teams enhancing the footage, cross-referencing it with tips from the public, and trying to match the physical evidence to anyone in existing databases. It's that combination, the planning, the escape, the mystery around the motive, despite Tyler's conservative background, that has turned this into one of the most closely watched investigations in the country right now. Who was he, and why did he do it? So who exactly was Tyler Robinson, and why would he take such a drastic and horrifying step? That's the question investigators, the public, and even his own family are now struggling to answer. Tyler Robinson was just 22 years old, a young man from Utah who, on the surface, didn't stand out as extraordinary in any way. Yet law enforcement quickly identified him as the shooter. His capture came surprisingly quickly, and not because of some elaborate sting operation, but because someone close to him, a family friend, went to authorities after Robinson reportedly confessed or hinted at what he had done. His father, with ties to a local church minister and connections in law enforcement, also played a key role in convincing him to come forward. And then there's the evidence. Investigators say it's overwhelming. A bolt-action rifle believed to be the murder weapon hidden away in nearby woods, a palm print and a footwear impression, even forearm marks left on the rooftop where the shot was fired. Surveillance footage sealed it further. Video of a figure fleeing the roof matched Robinson's description almost perfectly. But the harder part to pin down is why. Those who knew Robinson say he had become more political in recent years, and he didn't hide his disdain for Charlie Kirk. Reports suggest he had made cutting remarks about Kirk's rhetoric, calling it hateful, and investigators are now looking at his online communications for further insight. Discord messages and other digital footprints are under review, and they could reveal whether Robinson was merely venting frustration or actively plotting something darker. The way the shooting unfolded points to planning, not impulse. A lone sniper's shot from distance,
A clean escape route into the woods, and a weapon stashed nearby all suggest he had thought this through in advance. This wasn't random. It wasn't reckless. It was deliberate. Still, the full picture isn't clear. What exactly pushed him over the edge? Was there a single moment or statement that hardened his views? Did someone influence him online? Was this purely political, or was there a mix of ideology, anger, and perhaps personal instability? Now, those questions don't have firm answers. So in the end, what we can say is this. Tyler Robinson was a young man whose outlook grew more hostile and political over time. He turned that hostility into action, carrying out a calculated assassination of one of America's most polarizing conservative figures. The evidence points to premeditation and intent, but the precise motive, the why behind the act, remains murky, and investigators are still digging. Here's a long form on the left versus right debate in the aftermath of Kirk's death. Now, corrected to reference Luigi Mangione, the CEO murderer you meant, drawing parallels in contrast to the left versus right debate. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the political polarization in America has intensified, with both sides interpreting the tragedy through vastly different lenses. On the right, many view the killing as confirmation of their warnings that outspoken conservative voices are endangered by a culture of extreme animus, and that rhetoric, often denounced as fiery or provocative, may have real-world consequences. Trump and conservative media personalities have rallied, painting Kirk as a martyr and calling for stronger protections for speech and assembly. The left has a different reaction, with many online going as far as to celebrate the murder of an outspoken Nazi. Many argue that while invective and polarization are dangerous, they aren't equivalent to the kind of premeditated violence that killed Kirk. Some on the left worry about elevating Kirk's persona into an untouchable icon, one where criticism of his ideology gets dismissed as complicity in his death. There is deep concern that turning Kirk into a martyr will further divide the country, reinforcing echo chambers rather than fostering understanding. There are also parallels with the case of Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. In Luigi's case, a young man from a well-educated background allegedly assassinated a CEO, claiming to be motivated by perceived injustices in America's healthcare system. A handwritten manifesto, ghost-manufactured gun creations, and an overwhelming public discussion of motive followed. Some praised Mangione as an anti-establishment figure or even folk hero, particularly among those disillusioned with insurance industry practices. Like Mangione's case, Tyler Robinson's murder is now being framed as a challenge to political norms. Who Charlie Kirk was before that day. Charlie Kirk had spent years building a name that people either rallied behind or strongly opposed. He became known for being outspoken, unafraid to challenge popular narratives, and eager to stir debate wherever he went.
As the co-founder of Turning Point USA,
He turned what began as a small student movement into one of the most recognized conservative organizations in the country. He organized large campus events, ran social media campaigns that reached millions, and created a space where young conservatives felt they had a voice. Kirk thrived on confrontation in a way that made him stand out in modern political culture. He dove headfirst into debates about free speech, culture wars, and identity politics, often positioning himself right at the center of controversy. That was part of his brand. He wanted to be where the arguments were loudest, where ideas clashed, where people disagreed passionately. And because of that, his audience grew quickly. Supporters saw him as a defender of their values, someone who wouldn't back down when criticized. Critics accused him of fueling division and chasing the spotlight. But love him or hate him, almost everyone knew his name. His American Comeback Tour was the next step in that journey. It was designed to bring his message to college campuses across the country, to engage directly with students in unscripted conversations, and to spark the kind of debates that would trend online hours later. He was only 31 years old, married, and a father of 2, yet he had already become one of the most visible figures in American conservative activism. On that dreadful day in Utah, he came prepared for the same routine he had done countless times before. He expected tough questions, disagreements from the audience, maybe even protests outside the venue. That was normal for him. He was used to the noise, the confrontations, the passionate exchanges that came with his events. But as he stepped onto the stage, ready to do what he had done so many times before, no one in the crowd, least of all Kirk himself, could have imagined how quickly everything would change. Who Charlie Kirk leaves behind. When a public figure is assassinated, the headlines inevitably focus on politics, on ideology, on the scale of the crime itself. But behind the shockwaves and the noise, there is always a more personal story. Charlie married Erica Franzve in 2021. She is not only a former Miss Arizona USA, but also a woman with her own professional and faith-driven pursuits. She holds degrees in political science and international relations. To many of Kirk's supporters, Erica was seen as a steady, faith-anchored partner, appearing alongside him at events and in personal updates. Together they welcomed their first child, a daughter, in August 2022, and then a son in May 2024. 2 children, both under the age of 3, are now left without their father. For Erica, the journey ahead will be marked not only by mourning, but also by the immense responsibility of raising young children with the weight of public scrutiny never far behind. Kirk also leaves behind his parents. His mother worked as a mental health counselor, offering support to others in their struggles, while his father was an architect whose projects included contributions to high-profile buildings like Trump Tower in New York City. Both had been foundational in shaping Charlie's early years, encouraging his entrepreneurial streak and his leap into politics at a young age. Now they are parents grieving the unimaginable, burying a son who, for all his firebrand rhetoric, was still their child first. Financially, Kirk's legacy is significant. At the time of his death, his net worth is estimated at around $12 million. That figure reflects the many channels through which he built his career. His role as founder and president of Turning Point USA, one of the largest conservative youth organizations in the country, his popular podcast and radio show, which reached millions, his regular speaking engagements, often commanding high fees, and investments in real estate. While detractors saw him as a polarizing provocateur, there is no question he had successfully turned his platform into a substantial fortune. That wealth now becomes part of the practical aftermath for his family. Erica and their children will inherit not only assets, but also the complexities of maintaining or winding down revenue streams tied directly to Kirk's personal brand. Some of his fortune lies in properties and investments that can be passed on relatively smoothly, but other elements, media contracts, speaking commitments, the leadership of Turning Point USA, were tied to him as an individual.
Whether these channels continue to generate income or whether they wither without his presence remains to be seen. For Erica, this financial inheritance is paired with a daunting emotional reality. She must raise two children who will never truly know their father while navigating a public spotlight that may never fully dim. For Kirk's parents, their grief is coupled with the knowledge that their son's name will be forever linked not just to his movement, but to the violence of his end. And for the conservative movement, the loss of one of its most prominent young voices leaves an organizational and ideological void. In the end, Charlie Kirk leaves behind more than headlines. He leaves behind a wife who must find strength in faith, two children who will never truly know their father, and parents who must reckon with the cruelest loss. He also leaves behind a fortune, a sprawling network of influence, and a public legacy that will remain contested. But in the quiet moments, away from the speeches, the rallies, and the endless debates, it is his family who will carry the heaviest weight. Donald Trump's reaction. Charlie's assassination has unleashed a wave of public reaction unlike almost anything seen in recent political memory. Within hours, tributes and condemnations poured in. Former President Donald Trump was among the first to speak out, confirming news of the suspect's capture and labeling the murder a disgraceful act of political violence. Trump described Kirk as a patriot, a fighter, and a true believer in America's greatness,
calling his death not only a personal tragedy, but also a wound to the conservative movement. Other conservative voices followed suit. Figures like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Ben Shapiro took to their platforms, each framing Kirk as a generational leader whose work mobilizing young conservatives had reshaped the political landscape. For them, his assassination was more than an attack on an individual. It was an attack on an entire movement. Vigils have been announced by Turning Point USA chapters nationwide, with supporters demanding justice and greater protection for public speakers beyond partisan lines. Even some political opponents expressed shock. Lawmakers, while disagreeing with Kirk's rhetoric, emphasized that political disputes must never descend into violence. At Utah Valley University, where the shooting occurred, students and faculty held a moment of silence, acknowledging the enormity of the event. Donald Trump has declared that Charlie Kirk will be posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the nation's highest civilian honors. He made the announcement during a 9/11 remembrance ceremony at the Pentagon, just one day after Kirk was murdered while delivering a speech at Utah Valley University. Trump called him a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and said that millions of young people looked up to him. Trump noted that the date for the ceremony has not yet been set, but promised that when it happens, there will be a very big crowd. He also expressed deep grief over Kirk's death, extended condolences to his wife, Erica Fransvey, and their two young children, and framed the killing as a grievous act of political violence. Final thoughts. As the nation mourns Charlie Kirk, the lingering questions about Tyler Robinson remain unanswered. Who exactly was this young man from Utah, and what pushed him to pull the trigger? Investigators have assembled evidence pointing to planning and intent, yet the deeper motive, whether political, personal, or psychological, remains unclear. Did online influences radicalize him? Was there a singular breaking point? These uncertainties haunt the story as much as the act itself. Kirk's family and followers now face a future defined by absence, while the country waits for clarity that may never fully come. What do you think motivated Tyler Robinson to pull the trigger? Let us know in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Criminal Corners so you don't miss the next ones.